This city was completely cut off from the world, surrounded by steel walls stretching 80 kilometers, automatic guns and soldiers guarded the perimeter, shooting down any living thing that came near. Anyone who tried to escape the quarantine zone was mercilessly killed. In 2008, the city of Glasgow, Scotland, was struck by a deadly plague. Those infected with the virus would first go mad, then their bodies rotted away until death. The most terrifying part was how quickly the virus spread, with no known transmission method, and any attempt at creating a vaccine proved futile. Within a single week, thousands had died. The government, powerless, told people to stay home in self-quarantine, but it was all a lie. While the officials and elites evacuated in secret, ordinary citizens who tried to flee were gunned down by soldiers. Amid the chaos, a little girl was struck in the eye by shrapnel. Her desperate mother begged the soldiers for help. One soldier, unable to leave the child in this hell, gave up his evacuation spot to save her. From that moment on, the inside and outside of the quarantine wall became two completely different worlds. The government built a massive barrier 80 kilometers long, 30 meters high, and reinforced with steel. Mines were planted around it, and the airspace above declared a no-fly zone. Nothing could escape. Those trapped inside could only fight to survive, die from the virus, or die from starvation and chaos. Eventually, scenes of cannibalism emerged, and civilization collapsed entirely. By 2035, the little girl named Eden Sinclair, once lucky enough to escape, had grown into an elite soldier. Her injured eye was replaced with high-tech optics, capable of recording, surveillance, and reconnaissance. It became her most powerful tool in countless dangerous missions. Yet Sinclair carried a deep sorrow, the fading memory of her mother. When they were separated, her mother had left a letter with a name and an address, but the quarantine wall had sealed their fate forever. Her former superior, Bill Nelson, who had watched her grow up, felt pity for her. He advised Sinclair to take leave, but she refused. At that time, Sinclair had just completed a mission dismantling a human trafficking ring, but during the operation, the team discovered infected individuals showing symptoms identical to the Glasgow virus. The government took this seriously, fearing that London might become another dead city. Some officials suggested a home quarantine, with evacuation as a last resort, but Nelson argued that this was the same mistake made in Glasgow. They needed a real solution to prevent disaster. At that moment, the Prime Minister secretly showed Nelson a classified file. For years, satellites had been monitoring the quarantine zone. Images revealed survivors still living inside. This meant they might have found a way to resist the virus, or even created a vaccine. If a team could infiltrate the zone and bring it back, they could save everyone. Nelson was furious that the Prime Minister had kept this hidden, but the Prime Minister coldly replied that when the outbreak reached its peak, he would emerge with survivors and a vaccine, hailed as a savior. Realizing the urgency, Nelson didn't argue further. He ordered Sinclair to lead a small strike team into the zone, knowing she had waited her whole life for this chance. Before leaving, Sinclair learned that Dr. Marcus Kane, the scientist who had been researching the virus when Glasgow was sealed, might still be alive. If a vaccine existed, it was likely his work. Sinclair boarded a helicopter toward the quarantine wall to meet her team, unaware that in London, a darker scheme was unfolding. The Prime Minister and the powerful corporations behind him had decided to deliberately release the virus, planning to wipe out the lower classes. After checking weapons and vehicles, Sinclair's team and two virus specialists entered the quarantine zone in armored trucks. The gates, sealed for over 20 years, finally opened. Even as hardened soldiers, unease lingered in their hearts. Every house in the city bore numbers, signs of how many had once waited to be rescued, but all they ever received was abandonment. Soon, they reached St. Andrew's Hospital to begin their investigation. Inside, it was eerily silent, no trace of life. Suddenly, Chandler, who stayed back in the armored truck, noticed their signals being jammed. Turning around, he saw an image of a girl flicker on the monitor. Rushing outside, Chandler found the girl weak and barely alive. He carried her back into the armored vehicle. At the same time, the strike team inside the hospital was ambushed by survivors, poorly equipped but fiercely determined. The survivors swarmed in greater numbers, forcing Sinclair to order a retreat. Chandler drove the first armored truck ahead, but it was hit with Molotov cocktails, bursting into flames. As he tried to control the blaze, the rescued girl crept up behind him and slit his throat with a dagger. In his dying moments, Chandler pulled the pin on a grenade, taking her with him. With the first truck destroyed, the second vehicle drove into the hospital's basement. Fighting her way through, Sinclair managed to make it inside. But as soon as the truck surfaced, survivors fired crossbows from above, killing the driver. The vehicle lost control and flipped over. The team scrambled out to fight back. Though their firepower was superior, the survivors fought with suicidal ferocity. Except for two members who fled, Sinclair and the rest were captured once their ammo ran out. Saul, the ruthless leader of the survivors, chained Sinclair and tortured her, demanding to know who she worked for and where her advanced weapons came from. Realizing these people had lost all humanity, Sinclair confessed she was from outside the wall. To her surprise, Saul reacted strangely. For years, Dr. Kane had told them there was nothing beyond the wall worth exploring. This was Saul's first time learning that life still existed outside. He recalled how friends who approached the barrier were incinerated by flamethrowers and gunned down by auto turrets. Believing Sinclair could both enter and leave, Saul decided to keep her alive as the key to escaping. Her teammates, however, weren't so lucky. They became food for the tribe. Life among the survivors was a grotesque parody of society. They had acrobat shows, fireworks, and brutal torture acts, but nothing excited them more than a human barbecue feast. One captured soldier realized his grim fate. Enraged, he spat in their faces before being burned alive, his screams echoing into the night. As the grotesque feast unfolded, Sinclair plotted her escape. A guard brought her a plate of roasted flesh, trying to force her to taste her comrade. Instead, she yanked the chain from his ear, forced him to open the cell, and knocked him out cold. Another guard, distracted by a stolen watch, was swiftly taken down as well. Just as Sinclair prepared to slip away, a girl from another cell called out. Sinclair ignored her at first, but stopped when she heard her words. The girl was Callie, Dr. Kane's daughter. She claimed she could help Sinclair find him. As Sinclair opened an old gate, Saul's girlfriend attacked. She was a seasoned fighter, but malnourished and untrained. Sinclair overpowered and killed her. When Saul learned Sinclair and Callie had escaped, he roared with fury. Sinclair led Callie and two surviving teammates to a train station, but their trail had already been exposed, and Saul's men gave chase. Sinclair jumped off to cover them, only boarding the train at the last possible second. Saul could only watch as the train pulled away, then killed his own men in a fit of rage. On board, Callie revealed she could lead Sinclair to Kane but didn't want to face her father. Dr. Kane had become the leader of his own faction, preaching that the outside world wasn't worth exploring, merely a tactic to maintain his authoritarian rule. The deranged Saul was actually Kane's son, Callie's brother. Their conflict had only made Kane more dangerous. Callie, sensing the threat, fled from her father, but her brother imprisoned her anyway. As they spoke, the train stopped in a remote mountain area. The group entered an underground bunker stocked with supplies, clearly gathered deliberately. Exiting through the tunnel, they emerged into a forest. Suddenly, Callie noticed something was wrong and screamed for Sinclair to run, but Sinclair chose to stay behind. Soon, armored horsemen charged forward with spears. Sinclair and her team chose to surrender. With guns in hand, they could have fought back, but Sinclair believed this was the fastest way to reach Kane. Deep in the wilderness, finding him on their own would be nearly impossible. Callie, despite trying to hide, was also captured. Together, they were taken to Kane's fortress. There, Sinclair finally came face to face with Kane. Anxious for answers, she asked if a vaccine existed. Kane revealed the harsh truth. There was no vaccine. Survival came only through adaptation. Those naturally immune lived, and the rest perished. To Kane, in this chaotic era, immunity meant being chosen. Anyone without it deserved extinction. Sinclair struggled to understand his transformation. Kane explained that from the moment the government built the quarantine wall, his hatred for the outside world consumed him. He refused to let anyone take away the power he had carved out for himself. Knowing the outside world was still watching, Kane had hidden deep in the mountains to avoid detection. To protect his secret, he ordered Sinclair's execution. Sinclair realized escape was unlikely. Entering the quarantine zone may have been a mistake, yet the outside world had descended into chaos as well. The virus was spreading wildly, even reaching the Prime Minister's residence. An infected man nearly touched both the Prime Minister and Tycoon Canaris, but Nelson shot him down just in time. Still, blood from the infected splattered across the Prime Minister's face. Coldly, Canaris ordered his men to abandon him. The Prime Minister died, and Britain's ruling class quickly fractured into infighting. Inside the wall, Sinclair was forced into an execution match. It was staged like a medieval duel, her opponent clad in armor with weapons, while she stood unarmed. To Kane and the survivors, it was nothing but cruel entertainment. But Sinclair refused to give in. Using her speed, she wounded her opponent, then seized a chance to leap onto the stands and snatch a weapon from a guard. Armed at last, she fought like a predator, skillfully turning the tide and defeating her armored foe. Kane, enraged, immediately ordered her death, but just then, the entire fortress shook violently and began to collapse. Her comrades hadn't abandoned her. They had slain guards, freed the virus specialists and Callie, and triggered a massive explosion that brought down the stronghold. A hidden archer nearly killed Sinclair, but her teammate spotted him and shot him down with a pistol just in time. Reunited, the group seized several horses and galloped away, with Kane's forces chasing relentlessly. Then, fortune struck. In an underground bunker, they discovered a pristine limited edition Bentley, fully fueled with spare cans of gasoline. Overjoyed, they quickly refueled and scavenged for supplies. Sinclair even found unopened boxes of cell phones. But before they could leave, Kane's soldiers caught up. One of Sinclair's comrades stayed behind to hold them off, struck by arrows and sacrificing his life with bravery. Though grief-stricken, Sinclair had no time to mourn. She floored the Bentley, speeding out of the bunker, and finally escaped Kane's territory. After escaping, Sinclair used a stolen Nokia phone to call her superior, Nelson. She reported that she had obtained a vaccine and was on her way back. Nelson updated her on the outside world. The virus had spread everywhere, the Prime Minister was dead, and power now rested in the hands of Canaris. Hearing this, Canaris prepared to personally receive Sinclair. But on her return, Sinclair was ambushed by Saul. A small police Santana chased the Bentley, while motorcycles closed in from both sides. Saul drove a modified Pontiac convertible. Though far inferior to the Bentley, his reckless ferocity allowed him and his men to stay in pursuit. Saul leapt onto the Bentley, engaging Sinclair and her team in close combat. Just as they thought escape was impossible, one of Saul's men blocked the road with a bus. This time, Sinclair didn't hold back. She slammed the Bentley straight into the bus, splitting it in half. The Bentley remained unscathed, while Saul was killed in the crash. Soon after, Sinclair met Canaris. She handed over Callie, knowing the girl's immunity could be the key to creating a vaccine. But Canaris had no intention of starting research immediately. He declared that only when society was at its breaking point would he unveil the vaccine, ensuring his place as a savior. Those already infected, he said coldly, could die off on their own. The virus specialist was outraged by Sinclair's decision, but he and Callie had no power to resist and were forced onto Canaris's helicopter. Canaris then tried to recruit Sinclair, seeing in her the perfect soldier to secure his future dominance, but she refused, driving back into the quarantine zone instead. This time, she had no mission. She returned only to find the address her mother had left behind, searching for memories and an old photograph of them together. Knowing Sinclair would go there, Nelson found her. She handed him a recording. Everything Canaris had said had been captured by her cybernetic eye. With this evidence, Nelson could overthrow Canaris, but Sinclair also knew she would face Canaris's vengeance. She had thought it through and chose to stay in the quarantine zone, waiting until the storm settled before returning. As for survival, Sinclair wasn't worried. Carrying Saul's severed head, she walked into the survivors' territory. Their brutal society had a simple rule: kill the leader, and you become the leader. Under Sinclair's command, perhaps these people could have a different future. And that wraps up the entire story of the post-apocalyptic film Doomsday. What did you think of this movie? If you enjoyed it, comment 111 below. If you thought it was just okay, comment 222. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.